Hi, Brian.
Hey, Darrell.
How you doing?
Today's a good day.
Yeah, you've been blogging today, and we're here with this refreshed crowd. They've just been to lunch, so they're high energy, I can tell. You've been blogging today. I've been blogging today.
Yes, sir.
I think I have more posts than you today, but you did have 2 posts, which is a lot, considering you're the CEO of Intel and not a blogger.
And I do all those myself, as we were
Do you really? The blogs too?
The blogs, I have somebody help me write, because my English, I'm a classic engineer, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
Not very good at English.
Yeah, but you do your own tweeting, which we were talking about backstage. That's all you, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So what can you share some of the news that you were sharing today on your blogs today?
Sure, we're really excited today. There were really 2 blogs that we really talked about today. The first one was around our deep collaboration that we have with Waymo on really the next generation of autonomous vehicles.
Right.
And it's really a great example of how great companies are going to come together to build this technology. It's no one company is going to probably be able to deliver everything. And it's really built around Intel's compute, its silicon, combining with the sensor fusion and artificial intelligence that Waymo's bringing and putting it together in the Chrysler Pacifica for autonomous cars. Great.
So can you get into a bit more detail about that? I know you shared some information on the blog, but I'd love to talk about what that partnership looked like. And I think you guys have been working together for quite a while, right? Like since 2009 at least, probably?
We've been working together for quite a while to really understand, there's a bunch of different ways you can go and approach autonomous driving and how the car and the artificial intelligence is using the environmental data, the LiDARs, the cameras, the radar, the sonar, and how all that really comes together and builds a picture of the world, and then the driving is actually done. And so we've been working together with Waymo on how they want to best do this from a technology perspective. So it's a deep collaboration. They've actually put input into our silicon and our architecture. We've helped them with their IP and how to best integrate that into our silicon as well. And together we think we're going to build a product that is really powerful and capable of driving these cars.
Great. Well, then how does this square with sort of your other autonomous driving ambitions and Mobileye and your other companies?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good example of look, at Intel, if you look at Intel's long history in technology, we've always been about really delivering technology and being really supportive of the entire industry and not saying there's one solution and you must use this answer. And so, we have our Xeon technology, our Mobileye, which is really designed around sensor fusion and doing the autonomous feature of the car. We have all of those solutions that we can provide as one set of answers for car makers. We can work independently with them, like we are with Waymo, or we can actually just founder other people's silicon in that case. So we really tried to bring a solution that says, hey, we're here to really build this technology out, and we'll work across the spectrum of models to bring it to life.
Great. Just can we get into a bit more detail maybe about Mobileye and how that's been going? Because that's relatively fresh in terms of closing. It was $15 billion. Is that
a little more than $15 billion actually? So yes.
So
totally excited. So this is a case where, we looked at what the automotive industry really is probably going to need, and if you talk to the automotive OEMs, they don't want bits and pieces. They want a complete solution. So at Intel, we've been really working hard to be able to deliver what we kind of call from the bumper to the data center, everything along that continuum, and really provide them the engineering, the silicon, the technology, everything they need to build out that platform, and then also provide it as an open architecture that they can bring their software, their driving, their safety measures, all of that, their functional safety, down onto this platform. And so Mobileye was really a key part of that. It's basically the eyes and the upfront brain of the car that takes all the sensor data, combines it into a world view, and identifies what everything is. We use our Intel IA, Xeons to actually do the driving and plotting of how the car is going to go. But then we have our modems, our data center capabilities. So we're really providing this complete solution. The Mobileye acquisition was a key part. It's gone great. We closed that at the beginning of this quarter. They are actually going to take over, so it's kind of a reverse integration. They're going to take over our autonomous driving efforts. We are already, you've seen announcements with BMW, with Fiat Chrysler, with VW, so there's more to come. And I think, the open platform that we have there and the choice that they can use for how the architecture really comes together, I think it's a winning combination.
So you mentioned a lot of your other, the other components that you build for those systems. So what is the decision process then? You were partners before with Mobileye before the acquisition came through. What does the decision look like when you decide we're going to go out and acquire this on the market instead of building it ourselves?
Sure, so I think anytime you're asking yourself, do I partner, do I invest, or do I acquire? It really comes down to how can you best achieve the outcome you want. And in the case of Mobileye, what we looked at was that by acquiring them, it would be faster and easier for us to basically get the IP between the Mobileye IQ chip and our Xeon processor. We'll be able to integrate how those operate and provide the customer with a much better performance. So that's how we really looked at it, is that by sharing our IP, and in this case, basically sharing the information buses that are exchanging information between the driving of the Xeon and the viewing of the world of the IQ, by opening that up, by integrating those, we can provide a much better performance, lower power, and higher effectiveness for our end user. And so that's when we say, okay, to do that, to be that open, to really have that kind of relationship, it's best to acquire.
Okay. And it sounds like that's a lot of, what you're trying to do is make the process easier. But what about on the other side? Like a company like Intel, it's a large company that's been around for many, many years. Companies like that tend to have some inflexibilities, perhaps?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Intel's a big machine, over 100,000 employees, right? So I think well, in this case, like I said, we did a reverse integration. We left Amnon, who was the head of Mobileye before, as the head of this organization, and he reports directly to me. And the whole idea is to continue to run this like a startup based out of Israel, rather than say we're going to integrate them in, they're going to be like the rest of Intel. We're actually keeping them separate so that we keep this entrepreneurial, real startup mentality. Be fast, make decisions, not have to, Amnon knows he can make almost any decision he wants. And worst case is he just picks up the phone and calls me.
Right. So how does that then, another huge acquisition, not nearly as big in terms of monetary value, but like maybe importance to the company, similar, Nirvana from last year. Is that a similar sort of situation, or how did that work?
It is. In this case, we wanted to even do more integration. I think you're going to see. So let's step back for a second.
Yeah, in case people don't know.
I think we can elevate that discussion and just say it's really part of an Uber strategy of Intel to say, look, we're thinking about artificial intelligence, which is, although small in nature today, is one of the fastest growing segments of the data center. And it's just in its early infancy of beginning. What you see in artificial intelligence today and the kind of wow that we have on it is nothing compared to what's going to happen in the future. And so we've been assembling architectures, Nirvana, Mobileye, Saffron, their firmware, their hardware and software that will allow us to spread across the spectrum from the high performance, high power data center operations that are doing large calculations on large sums of data, thinking about trends in MRI data for cancer research or whatever. That's up at the Nirvana side, all the way down through to say Mobileye, which is really working on drones and robots, helping it really look at the world. And Mobileye fits in there as well. And so we think we're unique in that as we work with our partners, whether they're trying to build a large data center that's capable of a very complex AI or trying to build out the edge which are the robots and the drones and things like that, we can provide them a solution and a software platform that works across that spectrum. And that's really what we've been doing. That's why we went out and bought Nirvana. That's why we went out and bought Novidius. And it's really, if you take a look at it all, we've invested over $1 billion in all of these acquisitions to really build out that complete portfolio of AI capability.
Now, what about the change management portion of that? Like, isn't it a challenge to do that so fast and to do that in so many different areas at once?
It is, but I think that's both the strength and the weakness of Intel. In that, it's a big company, and so we can go across many areas very quickly. But what we've done is in these areas that we've bought these small startups, we've actually left them in kind of unique organizations that allow them to operate independently. And those organizations typically report directly to me. Mm-hmm. So again, that decision making and that autonomy can happen very, very quickly. And that's what we've tried to do in order to make sure that these platforms build out quickly. Right. Don't get caught by the large Intel machine, which is great for building PCs and running factories all over the world. That machine is flawless.
And what about the balance of the business? Speaking of building PCs, like how much of it is now focused on these new areas, these emerging areas, versus the more traditional Intel?
Sure. So this is a good statistic that I try and get across to people. When I took over 4.5 years ago, about 80% of our revenue was the PC. Mm-hmm. And we had a fledgling data center business and some memory and things like that. Last year, if you took a look at it, about 45% of our revenue came from things other than the PC. Right. And more than 50% of our profit for 2016 came from areas outside the PC. So we've, in this 4.5 years, really done a shift. And the company is now, I call it kind of a balance between the PC, which is still a great core business, mm-hmm. And what we call the data-centric businesses, which is artificial intelligence, robotics, data center, memory, all of these areas that really focus on the data and how it's being used. Analytics are applied in artificial intelligence.
Well, they sound very discrete when you put it that way, and it sounds almost like it might make sense to separate the entity and to have focus. Is that something you've considered, or how? We think about how to structure Intel all the time. There's a common underlying core, though, for Intel that you really want to continue to use. And even as we buy things like Nirvana or we buy things like Mobileye, they all come back to two things. They want to be attached to Intel architecture, the x86 architecture. The x86, whether it's in the clients like the PCs or whether it's in the data center, the footprint, the software ecosystem is just so big they want to attach that. Mm-hmm. Secondly, they want our silicon. Our leading edge, driving Moore's law to continuation is really something that, especially as you look at artificial intelligence, mm-hmm. they really benefit from that performance. And so they want that attachment. So every time we ask ourselves, are these two separate entities, the core and that shared intellectual property always tells us to come back and say, we're better together. Okay. So just getting back to some of these new businesses and newer businesses, you guys have also had experiments in the past where you've gone into things like wearable technology, for instance, maybe virtual reality and AR, and you're still doing work there, but maybe not as much as you used to. How are these not those? Like, how are these areas not, wearables, which is essentially a non-starter, especially for Intel now?
Yeah. So let's maybe separate that question into two things.
Sure. Okay.
How do we think about these new areas?
Yeah.
I think you have to look at them and you have to ask yourself: are one of these going to be the next mobile? Mm-hmm. Right. And the last thing you want to do is miss out on one of those. Right. So you have to get in early, you have to develop a technology, and then you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. One, do you bring differential technology to this, or are you just one of the many? And second, will the ecosystem, will the technology pay for that differential? Is there something there that somebody wants to pay for? And then third, is it scaling? Is it going to scale out? Do people see a need for this? You know, I think wearables have struggled from those last two.
Yeah.
There's not something that somebody wants to pay for, and they're not scaling at the rate. So we went in, we participated. We still have one of the best wearables, I think, with the Tag Heuer wearable watch.
Okay, yeah.
But it's just not scaling, so we're backing away. I think when you look at artificial intelligence, or it's such a large breadth, and it already is showing that it's the fastest growing segment of the data center.
Yep.
And every indication we see says that we're at the infancy of this. You know, the technologies that we're working on that are farther out in time, things like neuromorphic computing and where computing is going to, I think we're just at the entry point of artificial intelligence and what it's going to be able to do and solve. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at that, we say, yes, it'll scale. And yes, I think when you look at it, people will pay for that, and we are bringing differential technology. So it fit all three of those. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're pretty comfortable with these investments.
So it kind of has like
still keep looking at those other areas.
Right. If those could come back around, I guess.
They could come back around, or there's some that we're still incubating.
Yeah. What about virtual reality, augmented reality? Like, what are your thoughts kind of on that?
So I still think that virtual reality is going to be one of the key technologies, and so. What we looked at it's not clear that the headsets is the place that either A, we bring differential technology, mm-hmm. and B, would people pay for it, and is it going to scale? I think the costs and the quality is going to go up, and the costs are going to come down very quickly.
Yeah.
And so we looked at that and said, that's not the great place to be. Where we looked at is, how do you get great content into virtual reality? That's going to be an interesting problem. And what you see is what we've been working on. In fact, I was on Fox Major League Baseball on Saturday morning.
Oh yeah.
You're going to see us at the Olympics. Is getting the content into virtual reality. And we have a company called Replay that we bought, which think of it as you take 38 high-definition cameras around a stadium. You connect each one of those cameras back to its own server blade. Then you connect those up into a bunch of other servers that stitch those together, and you build a virtual playing field. And you'll be able to watch sports and move around the field. And if you watched the 2000 and the Super Bowl from last year, yeah. There was a one shot with Tom Brady where it was from his helmet, the helmet cam. Yeah. There was no camera in his helmet. That was us. And what we'd done was digitize the whole playing field, and we went in what we call a voxel. Think of it as a small little cube that's all digitized, and we looked out. And we did that all digitally with servers and technology.
That's great. So the consumption paradigm doesn't need to change in terms of like people wearing...
Yeah, and and the reason we think getting this in is it's got, you know, what you saw it on was a regular 2D TV, so it's got real interest in the normal broadcast, plus it plays perfectly into virtual reality. So we've signed deals with the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, La Liga Soccer. We're the sole provider for the Olympics for all their virtual reality content. So we've targeted the content space and specifically sports to do this. We think that's going to be where augmented reality, by the way, is just at its infancy,
right.
In my opinion, too.
So that's more similar to AI in terms of how you view the opportunity, or?
I think there's going to be a bunch of different ways augmented reality comes across. You know, you're going to see it you see it already on people's phones. You can implement the virtual world onto your real world, but where we see augmented reality is eventually, can I wear a pair of glasses like yours? Yeah. And the virtual worlds, I'm able to decide what content and what capability I have, and it's sitting out in front of me, and it's integrating into my real world.
It sounds kind of like selective reality.
Yeah, and when that's seamless, you know, when I want to look at down the street and say, hey, show me all the restaurants with 5-star ratings, and they just kind of pop up with little arrows, that's where virtual reality is really going to become, you know, something a user wants. And we're thinking about that. We're looking at those technologies as well. We'll see.
We're almost out of time. Just because of this audience, do you have any sort of like startup advice or stuff for entrepreneurs that Intel, how does Intel want to work with entrepreneurs, I guess?
So, we're constantly out there scanning the environment and looking for companies, startups that can really, add to this strategy that says we look for places where data is being aggregated, that analytics can then be applied to that data, and then as part of that, artificial intelligence comes right on top and really raise the value of that data, right? So what I would tell every one of these startups is, A, if you're in that space, come talk to us. We're very interested. B, understand, I think the biggest thing that when I talk to the startup guys, they don't understand either A, is the IP something that people are, is intellectual property they're developing something people are going to pay for? And B, can they scale it? Those two things are where I see more startups struggle and fail and have a difficult time getting to the next step.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks, Brian. Really appreciate you coming out.
Thank you. Glad to be here.